Welcome back, viewers. Junaid, what are your impressions on this issue of the globalization of religion? Because it has been said, obviously, because globalization is born out of the womb of modernity. Yes. Modernism has a certain way of looking at religion. It looks at religion as a backward form of human consciousness. But when it comes to the issue of the negative impact on environment due to globalization, it has been in the departments of theology and religious studies that are feverishly teaching theology of ecology, and not as much in social sciences as such, even though we do see some lip service to the question of environment. But globalization is the issue here, and so we want to discuss the globalization of religion. On one hand, it has led to the rise of fundamentalism. On the other hand, it is also expediting the efforts towards interfaith dialogue. What are your reflections on that?
Yes, and I think here it's important to say how the classic Weberian modernization theory, of essentially religion declining in its influence over people as modernization happens, as globalization happens. Of course, that's not been the case. We've seen religious revival throughout the world, and not just in the Muslim world, and also in the Christian world as well. And I think it's produced different types of religious responses, not a singular monolithic response either. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Akram, when you say that, in fact, on a lot of these questions, the old secular political ways of looking and dealing with these things don't seem to be doing the trick. Just to add a friendly amendment to what Dr. Ali was saying, some people would argue that modern civilization is basically unsustainable, the way it's heading. And so we may, like a lot of the gadgets and the industrialization and the comforts that it produces in the here and now, but for the long run, these processes unleashed by the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution and what I like to call the delusional revolution that many of us live in, that in fact the world, the way we're living in the world is in fact sustainable in the long run, that all of these things need to be questioned. And here I think theology and engaging religion, not in some way, not in the airy-fairy way to see, oh, what's going to happen after life, after death, and so on, but what can religion help us in the here and now? How can engaging religion and theology help us in living more fully and more humanly in the world today? I think that's what many people are looking at, and I think it's important here not to caricature the Islamist movements, political Islamic movements, all types of Islamic movements that are arising in response to these very unequal processes that we were speaking about earlier, the inequality and poverty and repression, authoritarianism that exists in many of these societies. Islamism is not some is not some atavistic or turn back to sort of 7th century Arabia. It is in fact a modern response, and this is why so many people are attracted in large parts of the Muslim world to it. And I think, coming specifically to your question, it is about how do intellectuals in the Muslim world, how do people involved in politics and in social movements, how do they engage many of these ideas, particularly coming from the global south? If you go just across the border in India, the type of critical engagement that's taking place on these sacred cows of modernity I was speaking about earlier, whether it's about the state, new forms of politics, the market, economics, that's, I think, where you see a rather impoverished response from many in the Muslim world.
But this is interesting that the globalization in literature, other than this critical element that all three of us are discussing, we have a certain critiques on globalization, but in that type of literature that presents globalization as something positive, makes it synonymous to the idea of progress. That today is better than yesterday, therefore tomorrow will be better than today. And so we're locked into that utopian worldview that doesn't seem forthcoming. And so if globalization has not really delivered us, it has certainly delivered us material progress, albeit for a smaller section of humanity, but it really it hasn't really delivered to the masses as such. But is it possible that if globalization is a double-edged sword, that it actually has the ability to transform the world, but at the helm of the systemic powers of the world, they want to actually make their life easy at the expense of other people. They want to they develop at the cost of underdevelopment of the others, and so forth. How do we turn this double-edged sword into a single-edged sword of the absolute good? That can we globalize good things?
Yeah, and I think that which stage are we at? I mean, if there is a critique of globalization and its environmental issues which are very real, and the whole idea of growth is being questioned because of its immediate impact now on the environment, etc. That's fine. But where are we at? We're at a stage where can we afford to be double-minded about progress, about development? Because we're at a very low base. Our people are at less than $1,000 per year, our per capita income. You know, over 40% live at under $2 a day.
Right.
So I think we can't really import the global critique, which is also a northern critique now emerging of globalization, and say that, okay, we need to now relax on the economic progress side. We can't do that. We're at the stage where we need to galvanize all our systems, to rationalize them, to begin to filter out the noises in the system which are making it more difficult for us to reform, to radically change, to get into a positioning for progress. There's a lot of noise in the system going on, and a lot of it is coming from induced religion, from over-religiosity, from running to, and then this happens when there is change and people are scared. They need some sort of kind of comfort.
Right.
But we're not really at the stage where I think the global critique of, or the northern critique emerging of globalization is particularly relevant for us. We're at the stage where we have to basically reform our institutions, which are suffering from rent-seeking, corruption, backwardness, lack of reform agenda, lack of dynamism, malaise, and therefore we are in a different mode. And let's look at our own ground realities first, and then develop our strategies accordingly, rather than see, okay, there is a upper debate going on in the stratosphere.
Basically what you're saying is that within globalization, of course, that there is a northern view of globalization and there's a southern view, just like Junaid also mentioned. And I think it's very important to take a look at this whole phenomenon holistically, so that obviously it seems improbable that we can actually reverse all the transformations that have happened in the world and go back to a certain different type of age. So we have to live within the technologies and the transformations that have come about. The question is, how do we then change it to our advantage, as again dependent on a set of power relations. But that itself is a lengthy topic, but the time is up. I would like to thank both of you for being here. Dr. Imran Ali, it was a lovely and stimulating conversation as always with you. Junaid, Ahmad, thank you very much for being here. Viewers, it is apparent that globalization, whether it is political or economic or social or cognitive, has this element of power relations, and we only hope that we can turn this whole phenomenon to the advantage of those who are oppressed, those who are depressed, so that they can participate in the process and transform their own lives. With more topics like that, we'll be back. For now, this is it. Khuda Hafiz.